1-week season.
OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes, we are back. We made it. NFL Week 1 is upon us for the 2024 season. Now, if you're new here, you don't know me. I am Hilow. I will be joined very shortly by the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Rich Hribar of Sharp Football Analysis. Also, if you're new here, you like what you hear, on over to 1 week season. Everything is free for Week 1. So go check that out. You'll get access to all the good stuff, the behind the paywall stuff, the inner circle stuff, including the Slate podcast for free for Week 1. If you are also new here, we, Rich and I, will be bringing this Searching for Ceiling podcast to you every week on Friday at noon Eastern. So you'll get the good every week from us. Without further ado, we're going to bring him in, Mr. Rich Hribar. And I should mention before I hand it over to you, Rich, if you're new to Sharp Football Analysis, Week 1, 77% off all weekly packages. And then you can use code TAKE25 for 25% off site-wide. Mr. Rich Hribar, how are you, my good friend?
We are so back. Can't believe it. It's this. We had a football game last night. We had an over. The first football game of 2024 actually went over the game total, which is a pleasant surprise compared to last year, where I don't even know if Week 1 a game went over. I remember Week 1 was like an all-time, like it was just a disaster for offenses. I hope we don't have something similar. But I think off on the right foot. Tonight's game looks good on paper. Looks exciting. We'll see if circumstances where the game's being played it impacts anything. But I'm excited. It's been a fun start to the season. I'm happy just to be talking about things in motion instead of the whole summer where everyone's given our full season player takes. I mean, think about it. We have 15 new offensive coordinators in the NFL. We have 17 new defensive coordinators in the NFL. Like we have player movement, free agency. Like things are just going to be different. And we're going to finally get the initial cards revealed on a lot of these situations.
Yes, and that is what is so exciting about Week 1 is a lot of people through the 6 months that we've been doing best ball prep, for season-long prep, for everything that we've been doing up until this point, we think we know these teams like the back of our hand, but there is so much uncertainty and so much that is going to be different than our assumptions. And that's one of the key, I think, points to talk about in Week 1 is we probably don't know these teams as much as we think we do. So that's going to lead into a little bit of what we're going to talk about here. And if we start like we did last season and we just start with the high game total games and we talk about the game of the week, there might not even be one of those this week. I mean, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Miami Dolphins with a high game total. We have the Buffalo Bills and the Arizona Cardinals with a high game total, but that's a fairly one-sided with the highest spread of the week as well. So talk to me about spots that you see on the slate that are sticking out other than the rest, and then that'll kind of guide our discussion here.
Well, in true 1 week ceiling fashion, the Buccaneers and Commanders are literally the first spot that I kind of just
I love you, man.
Navigate to. I mean, listen, we did this all last year. The Bucs were one of our teams we always picked for kind of like these game environment situations, like the high game totals. Now we're getting, the Cliff Kingsbury offense now on the Washington side kind of paired with There's a lot of things in motion, but how can we not start there? And it's a late game, which we know we love. We love the game stack, these late games where we have kind of optionality. We see the cards revealed in the early slate on all these game stacks with Texans, Colts. You hit on Bills, Cardinals, Jaguars, Dolphins. We're going to get to see all those revealed and kind of adjust our lineups as planned, use that late swap to our advantage. But I think for this, we play both sides. I'll start with just why I think this game's interesting, and it's because of Todd Bowles, right? Like Todd Bowles and a rookie quarterback, like he is going to be blitzing off of the airplane. Like the second Jaden Daniels gets off of the airplane, he might get some heat sent at him. But what is interesting about this is twofold. One, Jaden Daniels in college had some intriguing splits against the blitz. And granted, grain of salt, these are college stats. We'll apply them to the NFL. We'll see how it goes. But he had a 74% on target rate against the blitz, which was the highest rate in this draft class. And he was also blitzed at the fourth highest rate. So he's no stranger to the blitz. when the Bucs did blitz, they did blitz a lot. They were third in the NFL in blitz rate, but they didn't create a lot of pressures on their blitzes last year. And that's a big thing. They were 22nd in the NFL in pressure rate on blitzes. And when they failed to get pressure on blitzes, they were 22nd in the NFL in yards allowed per pass attempt. I also think the horizontal raid, which is what I call the air raid, trying to kind of, the ball's going to be coming out a little bit fast. We saw this in the preseason because one of the big bugaboos for Daniel coming out of college was takes a lot of sacks, invites pressure. But he wasn't sacked or pressured, 15 dropbacks only, grain of salt in the preseason. But he wasn't pressured to drop because his air yards were low. The ball's coming out in the horizontal raid. The other thing, too, is if he does hold the ball, in college, every single season of his collegiate career, he scrambled on over 30% of his dropbacks when he was blitzed. So there's a lot of opportunity here. We know we're going to get a lot of no huddle plays from Cliff last time he's in the NFL. They ran 600 more no huddle plays than the next closest team over that 3-year span. So there's tempo involved here. There's upside. I think with kind of both secondaries have a lot of question marks in this game. I don't want to eat up the whole shot clock here, but I start here though. This is where I start.
I'm with you, man. We are doing a new thing at 1 week season where we do a DFS labs, which is a building a lineup every day of the week. And I'm on Tuesdays, and I started with this game as well. And I prefaced that with, this might sound funny because I spent the entire best ball off season kind of taking a dump on Jaden Daniels. It was because there's a lot that he still has to prove, all the things that you mentioned. And I'm not a believer in Cliff Kingsbury. In his offense, I mean, you look at his offense, and his offense is basically 3 routes. You have crosser stuff, you have hitches.
How much mesh can we run?
Yeah, and you have goes. Like, it is a very, very simplified offense, particularly in the vertical. And then you look at the personnel that they have. My stance on their team shifts a little bit with the injection of Noah Brown to this offense. That said, I don't know how much he's going to be involved in week 1. We look at the unofficial depth charts. He's not a starter because he's only had, when this game kicks off, 12 days to learn this offense, which is, no matter how smart you are. I mean, you could be Andrew Luck football smarts, and it would be difficult to learn an entire playbook in 12 days. So for all that, I like the situation, and I am down on Jaden Daniels for the full season. I think his ceiling might be lacking. That said, this is probably his nuts matchup of the entire season. You just mentioned his tendencies in college against the rush. You mentioned the fact that Todd Bowles is notorious for getting after a quarterback, even more notorious for getting after a rookie quarterback. And this is now the rookie quarterback's first start. But when I look at that, and I look at Todd Bowles' Tampa 2 inspired kind of cover 3 defense that he has going on, that linebacking core does not necessarily have the juice to combat a mobile quarterback to the degree of Jaden Daniels. So in my opinion, though, if I am looking at this game environment, if we expect the Buccaneers to succeed offensively, if we expect Baker Mayfield to be doing something to be pushing the Commanders, again, against the 32nd ranked pass defense from last year, then we can actually access that upside through Jaden Daniels, because this whole game environment is kind of driven by Cliff Kingsbury, his pace. So if we're expecting the Buccaneers to be pushing the envelope on the scoreboard, I like doing that through Jaden Daniels here. And if I'm doing it through Jaden Daniels, I'm also saying that I'm expecting him to have some success through the air, because it's not going to be all on the ground as far as GPP worthy scores go. So due to the absence of Jahan Dotson, the fact that Noah Brown is with the team for 12 days, the fact that the starters are expected to be Luke McCaffrey, Olamide Zacchaeus, and a 33-year-old Zach Ertz, like, it is very easy and natural, and you can do it for not very expensive, to just tie Jaden Daniels to Terry McLaurin here.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I think Terry McLaurin had a great run out these final weeks for a couple reasons. Well, obviously with the trade of Jahan Dotson, it just creates a quagmire at wide receiver too. Like you brought up the names, they're probably going to have a rotation too. I think they're going to throw early in the season. It's going to take time to settle. They're going to see what works outside of Terry McLaurin. So we're going to see a rotation of guys as they try things out. So I think that helps Terry McLaurin. Probably will have his highest target share of his career. And the other thing, though, even if we don't believe in Cliff, like big picture from a reality stance, he's going to get Terry McLaurin a higher access to fantasy smoothing targets than what he's had in the past. His ADOT's going to probably be the lowest of his career this year. Terry McLaurin typically has had to rely on target volume that comes with an inherently low success rate. And then when you pair that with the quarterbacks he's had, it gets even dinged another level. I also think I look at this Buck side and they bring Jamel Dean back, but the rest of these cornerbacks, with the trade of Carlton Davis, like they're going to be relying on third rounder Tyke Smith to probably be the nickel back. 2022 fifth rounder Zion McCollum is going to be the other outside starting cornerback. He was the lowest graded cornerback they had on their roster last year in pass coverage. So they've got question marks, I think, on the back end. I'd have question marks if Washington's even going to be able to run the football in this game, if they'll have the game conditions to try to run in this game. So I do like the Terry McLaurin shot a lot. I think he's priced in a spot where gamers maybe not are excited to play him because Tank Dell is priced near him and people will be inherently trying to stack CJ Stroud. There's just, so that pulls away from him. So I do like McLaurin a lot. I don't think you're going to get to the stacking potential of these guys, but I do think Austin Eckler is going to be involved in this game. I think it's a game script and potential, like you talked about their linebackers, because the Bucks they had a lot of trouble guarding running backs in the backfield. So I do think it is a spot for Eckler to be involved in this, especially with everything kind of going on with the wide receiving core. In the preseason, we saw that Eckler on Jaden Daniels dropbacks was en route on 55% of those dropbacks. So Eckler in a full PPR site, I don't think I'm going to get there. I don't think he's going to have a GPP worthy score, but maybe if you're just trying to save salary, because I can't get there with Ertz either, even at 3,600. Like I can buy the targets, if you're in a cash game environment and you're punting, but it's hard to see a GPP worthy score of any of those guys. But I do think that those guys are going to be involved this week. I'm like you, just going to jam McLaurin in.
Yes. And particularly with the Eckler discussion, that's a very interesting shout. He's priced at 6K on DK. Like he's not priced down. And that's around guys like Rachaad White, who's going to garner a lot of ownership. That's around James Conner. That's around Kenneth Walker. The latter of two we should expect to kind of enter the season as a workhorse, quote unquote, back. So it's a difficult click, but if you're looking at small field stuff, there is merit to that kind of player block mentality with a guy like Eckler. So I like that shout a bit. I'll finish this with...
like if White's in your lineup and you're chasing, you might switch just directly to Eckler.
Yeah, that's a good shout. That's a good shout. That pricing allows you to do that. We'll end this discussion on this game. Well, I guess we got to look at the other side too, but we'll end this discussion on Washington's side by saying Vita Vea is healthy. That in itself should dictate kind of how this game is fought from the Commanders, because Vita Vea, in every season but 2021, when he was playing injured, he has been a top 3 nose tackle in the league. And that level of performance effectively just means that like the Buccaneers can tailor their offense around what Vita Vea can do, because he is that good against the run. So that's why we've seen the Buccaneers continuing to be a pass funnel offense or a pass funnel defense. And we should expect that, I think, to start the season here. Anything to add on the Commanders side?
No, not really. The things get more interesting on the other side when you think all the moves that Washington has made. Obviously, they hired Dan Quinn, big one. There's Ron Rivera's gone. This defense obviously was one we picked on all last year. They have a ton of explosives. It's going to be interesting to see the moving parts here, how Dan Quinn plays this, because the bodies they added improved probably their front seven more than the back end. I mean, you do add Jeremy Chin and Michael Davis. We'll see if, Sanderstill is on the field a lot. They did put Emmanuel Forbes in the field a lot last year. It wasn't this coaching staff, and it did not go over well at the beginning of last season. And Emmanuel Forbes is not the kind of body you want across from Mike Evans.
Yes.
Like absolutely not. He will get ragdolled.
Which I expect to be a lot this week.
Yeah, I mean, oh my goodness, he get absolutely ragdolled. But Dan Quinn even with the Cowboys, played a lot of man coverage. So we'll see, how much man coverage we're going to see them play. And then, the Bucks on their side too, they have a new offensive coordinator. Liam Cohen is the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive coordinator last time when Baker Mayfield had his last NFL stint pre-Bucks, that like 6-week audition with the Rams. before Cohen went to Kentucky. I think it was Kentucky.
Yeah, that's right.
And then came back this year's offensive coordinator. So there's some moving parts there. I still though question if the Commanders just have the outside cornerbacks to throw at Mike Evans, and if they're going to put any of those guys on an island, I think we just pick up where we left off this year.
That's
Hey
the theme
man,
of last year, man.
hey, Mike Evans made us a lot of money last year. We go back to Mike Evans. Looks like he's kind of priced in that same nebulous price zone that he was hanging out all last year. And I think people will inherently want to get the Godwin at his price in this matchup because of everything they've heard all offseason. Godwin's going to play more in the slot. Well, I mean, there is some noise to that as well. Like, of course, Chris Godwin was great in the slot. He played with Tom Brady like those years. Like, so I don't know if we might be retrofitting some of that stuff to his numbers. Like the same thing with Curtis Samuel and Joe Brady, right? Like everyone always hears about the Curtis Samuel numbers with Joe Brady. Well, yeah, Christian McCaffrey played 3 games that year. Like, of course he got like a huge bump. Think of it, so I don't know. Like anytime I hear stuff like that, I'm always kind of just like, well, let's look a little further into this. But
yes.
I'm with you.
We're big context guys here. We want to know the why instead of just presenting what happened.
Right.
I love that shout, dude. Also, we should expect some ownership to land on Chris Godwin. We should expect some ownership to land on Rachaad White. And Evans, again, just kind of feels like to start the season is going to be that odd man out as far as ownership goes. So I love that shout. It's difficult also because it's very, very difficult to build rosters for week 1 that have Mike Evans, that also have one of the top 2 wide receivers as far as projections, which are going to be Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. So that's kind of the crux of week 1 is like figuring out where the priorities lie.
And usually in week 1, by the time we get to this point in previous years, because the pricing comes out so early, we have had a running back kind of fall into just a spot where he was going to be like super chalky and probably severely underpriced. We kind of really didn't get that this year. Chuba Hubbard's probably the closest thing that we have. And like, how excited are people going to be to click Chuba Hubbard's name
against the Saints? Yeah, exactly. I mean, along those lines, it's like Chuba Hubbard, there's Jerome Ford maybe at 5,500. And then a lot of
Dowdle.
Rico Dowdle at like 4,600. Yeah.
But those guys all come with like severe question marks where in like previous years, you would have a guy where it's like, we know the workload, we know everything. Because even the Bengals guys, which are in a great spot, 9-point home favorites, it's tough to diagnose. Like who, playing Chase Brown and Zach Moss. I mean, I obviously, in the offseason, I preferred Zach Moss, but it could still be something in week 1 where both guys kind of cannibalize each other just because the game script is so one-sided.
Yeah. You're a big Zach Moss guy?
Yeah, I like Zach Moss in context of what he brings to the table versus Chase Brown.
Same. And I saw a lot of what had me hesitant on Chase Brown in the preseason, which was continuing to look for that home run, not taking what is blocked to him, not taking the 5 to 6 yards up the middle, which Zach Moss will do in this offense.
Yeah, that down-to-down consistency with Chase Brown has been a bugaboo all the way back to Illinois. He was a home run hitter or nothing.
Yeah.
You give him a tarmac because he's an athlete. You give him a tarmac, he's going.
Yeah, 10,000 feet of runway. This guy's going to take off for sure. A little Navy humor there. Anyway, I want to quickly shift before, or I guess, is there anything that you want to add on the Buccaneers side that we haven't talked about?
Not a whole lot. I think we covered it. I think that unless you've got something in the 11th hour here.
No. I mean, it's really like if I'm looking to attack this game environment, which I will be for week 1, it starts here for me. In Jaden Daniels, you're kind of getting access to the Buccaneers through Jaden Daniels. We know that Cliff Kingsbury is an up tempo. He led the NFL in the preseason in no huddle rate. So we expect all those tendencies that we're used to with Cliff Kingsbury to continue forward. What that means is additional offensive plays. And if you're giving these 2 offenses against these 2 defenses, additional offensive plays, I think there can be some fireworks here. So love Jaden Daniels. I love pairing him with or tying him to even Terry McLaurin, and Mike Evans is the upside bet on the other side for me. Beautiful. Anything else? Final hour here.
No.
All right, you mentioned something about the running backs, so I want to quickly transition to the running back rooms in on the slate, and I'll lead you in, and then I want to hear your thoughts. We talked about the kind of relative lacking of quote unquote workhorse or surprise workhorse backs. Typically, that's important on week one because of the pricing that is associated with those guys. It's hey, I can jam in 20 to 24 touches for 5,500. We're used to seeing that. We don't necessarily have that in clarity, we'll say, on week one. I mean, the closest guy is maybe Zamir White, depending on your feelings there at 5,700. But we mentioned the names earlier, and we do have the potential for 20 to 24 touches, but it's in this mid tier for week one. It's not in the sub 5,500 tier. So I mentioned Zamir White as a potential. We mentioned earlier Kenneth Walker, James Conner here in this 6K range as clear potential for that. And then you start comparing these guys that I just mentioned. Zamir White at 5,700, James Conner at 6,200, Kenneth Walker at 6,100. Comparing them to the touch expectations of these guys up here in Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Travis Etienne, James Cook, and it's fairly similar. And those guys that are priced lower probably have a higher touch expectation than those guys at the top. Are you reading the room the same way that I am at running back this week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have no CMC, no Brees Hall on the slate, the Monday night game. I mean, Bijan, if you're looking at it just from like the play it from like a top down, like game theory stance of how we handled the running backs all summer, Bijan would be in like a tier by himself, right? Because he was a first round draft pick. He's the only one that kept an ADP close to those guys. Those two guys are off the board. So it should make him pretty clear. Jonathan Taylor is going to have a game environment, but I think his projected ownership is going to be higher than what it ends up being because of the Richardson factor. Like I think more people want to play Richardson, therefore will not play Taylor because they won't play both. What's interesting is I actually think that I'll save it for later, but I think there are two running backs that I actually think make sense to pair with their quarterback this week.
Yes,
usually a no, but
no, I love it. That is usually a yes for me.
Yeah, usually, actually, I shouldn't say it because usually Hilow's on board with some of those guys, but
yes,
I do feel similarly though about those, especially when you factor in some of the road spots for some of these guys like an ETN up at the top, especially Miami on the road early in the season is always kind of a red flag for me. Like when you play in Miami because they have that wonky home field advantage where they make the opponents sit in the sun, it's like 30 degree difference of on field, heat index versus their side. And if you look at their splits, like it totally like ramps up on that. Like they're awesome against they have actually, since they renovated that stadium, they have the best home record against the spread in early kickoffs because of that. And they make the opponents wear dark jerseys. It's like a complete manipulation of a lot of things that shouldn't be allowed. But so I'm always concerned. And the Jaguars have a lot of moving parts. Like if the Jaguars came out and laid a dud, I wouldn't be surprised in that game. But also if they were good, the Dolphins just have so many moving parts on defense too, that maybe it just opens up the door for that game to get to the levels everyone wants it to. But yeah, who was the running back you were trying to guide me to there?
No, it was more. It's just more that middle range as a whole kind of mentality. And because I think that in week one, the salary is better spent at the wide receiver position. We talked about the cost of Mike Evans. We talked about how we're going to be kind of fighting to get one of.
I would include Aaron Jones in that group too. He's like a couple hundred more.
Yes. You mentioned, okay, is that one of the quarterback running back pairings?
Well, he can't. I don't think I'm going to get to Darnold just because there's so many guys this week. But I don't have a problem if anyone does.
One of the things I really like this week is attacking that running back, including in a team primary stack. One of those for me is Darnold, Aaron Jones, and Justin Jefferson. We look at the situation of that team right now. It's like we have Jordan Addison has an ankle injury. We have Jalen Naylor who has an ankle injury. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson is out to start the season on PUP. So it's like, where are these targets going? And if they're going to be throwing the football 32 to 35 times, it's like we might see Justin Jefferson and his running. I'm just fucking early and I lost his name there. Aaron Jones. Yeah, thank you. We might see them combine for something silly like 22, 24 targets. Like
and it's probably a blind spot for me. I always like to just get my quarterbacks down to like 4
Yeah.
and as like my core lineups, then maybe I'll do some game onslaught stuff and smaller field things. But I do have both Aaron Jones and Justin Jefferson to be kind of overweight on, so it's probably just a hole that I need to bring Darnold along for the ride in spots.
Yeah, I will be doing that in week one. I think it is extremely plus EV. Why do I say that adding the running back is plus EV? 2 years ago, I did a study on comparing the GPP winning, the Millie Maker winning lineups on DraftKings to the optimal roster on that week. And what I found was a 22.2% overlap between those two in combining or adding a running back to a primary stack. And I can guarantee you I don't have the data because I don't have access to the API of DraftKings, but I can guarantee you that the field is not utilizing running backs in a primary stack at 22.2% frequency. So
On a full PPR site.
on a full PPR site, right? So that is just inherent EV, doing things that are proven to be successful at a rate higher than the field is doing. So yeah, I like that shout. Tell me what your quarterback, running back inclusions are for week one.
Well, we were probably going to get to the game, but I think if you're going to play the most popular running back on this slate, and maybe he doesn't end up being the most popular, but he will be a top three. Devin Achane with Tua would be one is a way to do it. I think that I believe. So what? Here's the interesting thing. Well, yeah, with Tyreek.
Yeah.
So the one thing I do when I look at this Dolphins backfield, right? It's hard to take a lot from what they did last year and apply it because they were never healthy. The unit was just never healthy together.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look post Denver game when they dropped that 70 burger, there was only 5 games from the rest of the season on where both Achane and Mostert finished the game together.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of the usage that both those guys had was because one was either out, one was, Jeff Wilson was out. Like there's just a conglomeration where it just was never fully put together. Now you had Jalen right to the mix. I don't think we can take a lot from the dispersal of touches last year and apply it, but I do believe that they are going to incorporate Devin Achane as a pass catcher in this offense.
Yeah.
I think that, you want to take a lot of things in the preseason, but like the fact that they're even putting him on the field and having him run routes as a wide receiver, giving him live game reps like that, I think he's going to be part of the passing game. And the Jaguars the Jaguars have they're another team, new defensive coordinator, hired Nielsen over from Atlanta. But this was a team that could not guard running backs out of the backfield at all last year. They were actually, opposing running backs had the league high share of receptions against the Jaguars. So I think if you're going to play Achane, I like actually putting him with Tua to be unique in your Dolphin stack, because that's how you get some diversity with the Dolphins playing them.
Yeah, I mean, and they were lining him. He was aligned wide on a few snaps in the preseason. He saw a target and a reception wide. He saw 2 targets aligned wide this preseason. So I like that shout a good bit. How are you handling bringbacks? Are you forcing bringbacks with the Jags because they are not expected to be concentrated, but they're priced as such? I mean, their pricing is pretty easy to fit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being a little more cautious on fully game stacking this because I think the field wants to, because it's easier because the Jaguars are affordable. Like I said, I do stock that Miami home field stuff. I mean, it is ongoing for years. Even last year, they were 4th in points allowed per drive at home compared to 30th on the road. I don't think this defense is good. I just think it's a legitimate home field advantage. Like it is what it is. It's like mile high early in the season. It's like, especially when these teams don't have conditioning, and the Dolphins are the fastest team in the NFL. Like they make like if the Dolphins score quick 2 touchdowns in the first quarter of this game could just kind of get bad on the Jaguar side. The game script could be just really terrible. But I don't really know how to play the Jaguar side is the other problem. I think ETN is the clear like GPP guy, just because you look at his projected workload and what they had last year. And there's a lot of these players where it got double counted, the players like inefficiency so Kyron Williams, the backups were complete trash. They had Blake Corum. It's going to reduce his workload a little bit, but he was never going to sustain the workload he had, the backfield share he had. Rashad White's another guy. The backups were complete trash. He had 75% of backfield touches. They were going to add a running back. They did. But let's not completely double count everything. But the Jaguars didn't. They're just hoping Tank Bigsby's better. Like their whole thesis is like, we're hoping this guy that was legitimately the worst running back per snap in the NFL last year is better than he was last year. They didn't add anyone else. So I have a hard time thinking that ETN's workload is going to be super compromised here. And if you're talking about a guy that actually has like touchdown equity, he could get 2 in the box for you. Like, there's a chance here. I don't know how to play a passing game though. I mean, you add Gabe Davis, and Gabe Davis is one of these guys. No one likes Gabe Davis, but he's a guy that plays snaps more than anyone wants. He's active in the run game. Chad Hall, the wide receiver coach for Jacksonville, was his wide receiver coach in Buffalo. There's a reason why he went over there and probably was vouched for going over there. Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram did not perform together at all last year in unison. All of Evan Ingram's, Evan Ingram's big splits came with Christian Kirk off the field. Also, Christian Kirk, there was early signal last year they didn't want him to play in 2 wide receiver sets. Then Zay Jones gets hurt. It gets thrown out of the window in week 1. He gets boosted by that. He's coming off an injury. Is he not going to play in 2 wide receiver sets in this game? Does he only play in 3 wide receiver sets with the addition of Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr.? And then Brian Thomas Jr., I get it. He's cheap. But my problem with Brian Thomas Jr. is he didn't earn targets per route in college. And again, very small sample preseason. He didn't earn any targets this preseason either. He was targeted on just 7% of his routes. So he's it's just a lot of guesswork for the Jaguar passing game. Now that guesswork can lead to someone running into something here. But I honestly, maybe you can guide me. I don't really have a great feel of how I want to play the Jaguar passing game.
Yeah, it's tough. I think you can take shots on Brian Thomas Jr. just because we're expecting him to kind of step into a fairly significant red zone role. And he's got that size and body control mixed with speed, which is a very, very unique combination. So I think that it's going to depend on probably schemed usage. Like you mentioned, he was not been a commander of targets. But when we saw him in the preseason, I mean, he took a slant for 32 yards in the preseason. And it was good for me to see him see that higher percentage targets on a slant or something over the middle of the field, as opposed to strictly working in a X type wide receiver perimeter type role. And
to be fair, he is a guy, if he only gets 5 targets, they could be viable targets. Like the 5 he gets, or 5, or say he gets 5, 6 targets in this game. They are the types of targets they are probably going to be valuable targets.
Yeah, this is a guy who has the pedigree to go something like 5 for 102 type game. Seemingly out of nowhere, people are going to be like, well, how did that happen? But when we look at the composition of this team, very clearly Trevor Lawrence has a career-long struggle in the red zone. I mean, his career touchdown rate is 3.2%. And you look at compare. I don't want to compare it to Tom Brady, but compare it to Tom Brady loosely, and Tom Brady's up at 6%. You have Aaron Rodgers, who's up at career 5.9%. So his very clearly has struggled in the red zone. We saw that with Calvin Ridley last season. He was supposed to be the guy that was going to fix that, did not. So is that guy Brian Thomas Jr.? I don't know. But if I'm going to place a bet in this offense, I think it's going to be on Brian Thomas Jr. Before the field kind of wakes up to kind of the pedigree that this wide receiver is.
Yeah, in general, this slate in particular seems to be rookie wide receiver heavy. To take shots on these guys. I think obviously Neighbors is going to be this will be the cheapest Neighbors is all year. There's just no
maybe
way.
For his career.
this is and he's going to be popular for that reason, because the price zone he falls in, but I don't think that should deter you from playing him.
Full concur. We talked about Minnesota team stacks. It's very, very fun and very, very easy to do. Darnold with Aaron Jones, Justin Jefferson, and bring it back with Neighbors. So I will be on that as well. Tell me about, or I guess, is there any other onesie twosies you want to talk about here in this game before we move on?
No, I didn't know if you could tell me on if you had a North Star versus the thing about this slate, looking at projected ownership, and it's week 1 projected ownership, and we're a few days out from other injuries impacting things. But Evan Ingram projecting for some of the highest ownership at tight end is very puzzling to me.
It is. Me too. I want to save my thoughts on the tight end position for the Slate podcast, which again is free for everybody, for the masses. So I'm gonna shelve that for a day, because that will be tomorrow morning. That said, man, I forgot where I was gonna go with this. Dang it. All right. I'll just throw it back over to you. I had a thought. It'll probably come back to me. But
we can let's tie that in, and you don't have to give your full thoughts, but let's tie it into the two tight ends that are higher price playing against each other.
Let's do that.
We'll do a little
very
Cardinals
natural
Bills.
way to go.
We'll do a little Cardinals Bills and try to segue it that way.
Okay.
Um,
My read on this game, I'll give it first, and then I want
Go
to
ahead.
hear yours. Josh Allen has a very, very high frequency rate of returning GPP viable scores. And the state of the week one slate, how there are only 3 games with a game total over like 45 points, how we continue this trend of scoring is down throughout the league. Um, 30 points, regardless of what you have to pay for it, is likely to mean something. That is why the field is gravitating towards team jam 'em in or pick between the two of Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson, because these are very, very clear avenues to get access to 30 plus fantasy points. For me, Josh Allen is that in week one.
Mhm.
We can say what we want about his pass catchers. We can say what we want about can this offense succeed without Steph Diggs. But it's very, very clear that he is probably the best chance on the slate to pop for 30 plus at the quarterback position. That said, it's very, very hard to jam in a quarterback at his price range, which is 8K. This is the same price tier as Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson, which we're looking to play. In my opinion, my read on this Buffalo offense, looking at the pass catchers, we have a tight end who did not score a red zone touchdown last season. His
Yep.
touchdowns were all from 21 plus yards out. We have a running back who struggled in the red zone. So it's like, where is this team going to score touchdowns, or how are they going to score touchdowns? It's back to Josh Allen for me. Yes, they added a bowling ball, 5'8", 211-pound running back in the offseason. But how quick are they going to be to integrate him? Probably, knowing this coaching staff, it's probably going to take a few weeks. And that kind of brings me to the wide receiver that I think is the most ready to contribute consistently on this offense, and that is Khalil Shakir. I mean, we look at what he did last season. In the second half of the season, after Joe Brady took over, he outgained Stephon Diggs on half of the targets, which is eye opening. And he is a guy that can play pretty much any wide receiver position. I mean, he has a 6 foot, 185-pound frame. He can play the Z type downfield stuff. He can play in the slot. We have Curtis Samuel, who has turf toe. We don't know how much he's going to be involved. So for me to kind of mitigate the salary that's sunk into Josh Allen, for me, it's Khalil Shakir. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like Shakir a lot in this game at his price point too. This is also another team that's just going to have a rotation. You kind of hinted at, like, they've slow played all of their rookies historically, this regime. And that
Yes.
includes Dalton Kincaid last year. Remember, Dalton Kincaid really didn't get rolling in terms of team target share until Dawson Knox was injured.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that's also going to be a thing for Ray Davis, and then obviously is going to be a thing for Keon Coleman, who didn't answer any of the questions we had for him in the preseason either.
Yes.
We're going to see Matt Collins play in this game, guys.
Did you
It's going to
see?
happen.
Did you see the Buffalo beat reporter that on Keon Coleman's first reception was like, everyone was saying like he can't separate. Well, what do you call this? And it was like, it was a comeback. Like, dude, that's not separation. That's like whatever. Anyway, yeah, Keon Coleman is a guy that's not going to be a separator. He's going to be a DeAndre Hopkins-esque body control
Yes.
type wide receiver that can be viable in the red zone. We got a comment here like, yes, he's tall. Yes, we saw him have a red zone or an end zone target in the preseason. But again, it kind of takes a while, particularly with Josh Allen, who is more in line with like this Aaron Rodgers-esque mindset, in where it is extremely valuable to see an on-field connection and an off-field connection with a guy like Josh Allen. Look at what he dealt with last season with Steph Diggs. I mean, even in their playoff loss, where they had it in the bag, Steph Diggs had it in his hands on a deep shot, and he didn't come down with it. And you see the camera pan back to Josh Allen, and he's just like hands on head, like, damn it, man, what do I have to do? So for me, Khalil Shakir is the only guy that has played with Josh Allen. That's kind of where I am going here.
I have
And it's
one more, and
yes, let's
it's a
hear it.
Hilow hater. Hilow hates this
Uh-oh.
guy.
Uh-oh.
It's James
Let's hear it.
Cook.
All right. Yeah, and you're right. I do hate this guy. But is this
wait.
one of your quarterback running back pairings?
Yep. This
Okay.
is so.
I'm with you. I'm with you here.
So this particular spot, I think James Cook is probably overvalued in season-long leagues and stuff, but I think this particular spot, the way everything lines up with the way the receiving core is in this game entering week 1, and this particular matchup where we've seen Joe Brady in his small sample with the Bills, when he had an opportunity to face a team where he can run it down their throat, he would.
Yeah.
He did. He did it multiple times. He did it with James Cook, and we get this passive Jonathan Gannon defense. Just the changes they've made this offseason, very minimal defensively. This is a linebacking core that cannot guard running backs. Like they were so giving to, they were 31st in yards per scrimmage on the running backs last year. They were 26th in receiving points allowed to running backs. They were also 30th in rushing points allowed. From a GPP stance, like, yeah, we do need probably him to score a long touchdown, but that's, I think, within the range of outcomes this week for him to score a long touchdown, catch passes. And the way he can be used as a dual threat player in this particular matchup, I think is appealing. And no one's going to play him because of where his price is. And I hate to use that flippant phrase, no one's going to play him, but where James Cook is priced this week, I think it's going to make it a harder click for a lot of people to get to. And I just think inherently a lot lines up for him out of the box. Like you talked about, you didn't really like Jane Daniels and everything lining up.
Yeah.
I think that is very similar to what James Cook has on the table for him in week 1.
That is a very, very good bring back to what we talked about with Jaden Daniels, because I am low on James Cook for season long for best ball stuff. But one of the things that we really, really have to work through is the biases that we built up over the last 6 months playing best ball, prepping for season long. And that is going to be, I think, one of the deciding factors early in the season is realizing that all these offenses are so different. We don't know as much as we think we know. And when we analyze a slate, we need to do so in the framework of that slate instead of bringing along those biases that we built up over the previous 6 months. So yeah, I am down on Jaden Daniels. I'm down on James Cook for best ball. But they're very clearly in what could be the nuts matchup for the entirety of the season. We talked about like the fact that this coaching staff doesn't bring rookies really into the fold at a early in the season. So like, I expect James Cook to be that, like, have the upside for 24, 26 opportunities here. And when you're
we
talking
saw a couple
about
of those games, like the Dallas game, both Chiefs games that they played towards the end of the year. So there is like actual upside to him as well. I mean, there's a lot of downside too. He's a volatile play, no doubt, but that's why, I mean, he becomes an interesting stacking partner.
I do want to have access to Josh Allen, and I do want to have access to this Bills offense in very clearly like the easiest spot they're going to get in the entirety of the season. And I think right here, I'll pull it up on the screen, is a very, very sharp way to do that. So I'm with you here. I am with you.
I gotta sell you on a player, but
yeah,
when he has 130 touchdownless yards, it doesn't hit either bonus, you can give me a bunch of grief.
No, I really hope. I mean, we talk about like on and this is an interesting segue too, because like FanDuel just added yardage bonuses as well, which kind of had been like the separator differentiator for DraftKings. Very interesting if you're playing FanDuel. Definitely don't let that go missed.
I just actually found that out this week, early in the week. That was like, oh wow, they changed their scoring because I didn't play any preseason. And I was like, oh wow, there's bonuses here now.
Yeah. When you talk about the Cardinals now, if we have this stack where we're attacking the Bills, are you forcing a bring back to potentially one of the tight ends that we talked about earlier and Trey McBride? How are you handling the Cardinals here?
Yeah, I think McBride stands out the most, but there is a little bit of wonkiness with him too, because all the splits that he had towards the end of the last year, he had no competition at the wide receiver position. I mean, Greg Dortch was second on the team in receiving yards over that span. When Greg Dortch, fan of podcast.
big fan.
From week 10 on, that was it. It was McBride and Dortch. Now he's getting not only a wide receiver, but like a wide receiver that's entering the NFL with legit pedigree, like literally thought of, as a can't miss prospect. So that gap is going to be tightened. It's the target tree. So how much does he concede to a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr.? I will say though, when you go back to Kyler Murray's like best stint in the NFL, it was when he played with a good wide receiver. So there could just be more of an uplift for the passing offense in general. Just adding Marvin Harrison, he could be a thing where the the tide lifts all boats type of deal. And then Drew Petzing's just another guy. Like last year, we had a lot of faith in like what he was able to work around with that offense. I think they're going to score points in this game. The Bills, obviously, they have a new defensive coordinator, Bobby Babich. They have 2 new safeties. The longtime combination of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyder they're no longer there. They're going to be playing Damar Hamlin, which is a great story, but Damar Hamlin played 18 defensive snaps last year, and he's going to be starting for them this year. Matt Milano's out. There's a lot of moving pieces for the Bills defense, which also coincides with Josh Allen's first real big payday in the NFL on the books, which isn't a coincidence. But I think the Cardinals are going to score here. I think they're going to score points. I think they're going to be live. My problem with the Cardinals, if you're like from a betting stance, if like you're like, oh, should I bet the Cardinals then because they're getting 6, is that I don't think they're getting any stops on defense.
Yeah. So check this. This might be vomit inducing from the public, but when I look at how I want to add to this, I'm with you that I expect the Cardinals to achieve some level of offensive success here. And if they're doing that, we just mentioned the fact that they do have a expected workhorse running back. That is something that is going to induce some vomit from the general public. But I like adding James Conner to this. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no problem with it. I mean, it's another thing. James Conner is another guy. Like their backups were so bad last year. When James Conner wasn't on the field, Cardinals running backs were 20th in success rate, 21st in EPA per rush. They were always going to improve that. So they were always going to add a guy like Trey Benson, and it gives them runway for Conner, not only because he's missed time every season, but his contract is also expiring. So they cover a lot of bases with the addition of drafting a player as a second running back coming off the board in the 3rd round. But that doesn't mean that Trey Benson's going to be locked into like this huge workload. I think it still will be James Conner with at least like a 60% plus share of backfield touches out of the box, if not a little bit greater out of the box opening, especially on the road in Buffalo. I would expect the veteran to play a lot more snaps in this game. And Conner was excellent last year when he played, like 4th in EPA per rush, 6th in success rate, yada, yada. Like he was a good player. The thing about Conner just never stays healthy. So I actually don't mind it. We talked, the Bills were a very feast or famine run defense last year. They said they have changes. They were 10th in yards allowed per contact rush, but they were 31st in yards after contact. James Conner was 2nd in that category, yards generated after contact. So I actually don't hate that, because also the Cardinals, the other thing is I think that they stick with the run. I think their bread and butter, the strength of their offense. Even it's crazy to think about because their offensive line isn't good, but their offensive line wasn't good last year and they ran the ball successfully. I think that's a big factor for them. And then also when you think about just like them being 6-point dogs, they probably come out and they want to kind of muck up this game. I think. I think that's probably the inherent goal. So I actually don't mind that at all.
The final piece I'll add with Conner is we point to his declining pass game involvement through as his career has progressed. But if you look at like his game logs when he played last season with Kyler Murray, it was much different story. I mean, we have games in here 4, 5, 3, 5, 3, 2 targets. Compare that to early in the season when he was not playing with Kyler Murray. He only had 1 game over 3 targets. So there is a little bit of floor bolstering pass game usage there when he is playing with Kyler Murray. So I think it is viable. Before we continue, I think we have to talk about what could fundamentally change this slate. And there's 2 situations that could fundamentally alter how we're looking at this slate. One is the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh. We have Russ, who pulled the trainer aside and said, "My calf, ouchie again." So how is he going to play? Are we going to get a Fields injection into this offense? And the other is the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver core. We have Jamar Chase, who didn't practice until Wednesday leading up to this game. We don't know, is he going to make good on his holdout? Is he legitimately going to hold out? Or are they going to get a deal done? There's still a lot of uncertainty there. And now on Friday, we have T. Higgins missing practice with a hamstring injury. So is it like Jam Yoshivash week? Like this could fundamentally alter the slate as well. You seeing anything else that levels of uncertainty that could kind of change the slate here?
Well, definitely the Bengals situation is going to change a lot of things. But I will say, while I would, if you're playing cash, there's no reason not to play Yoshivash if you're doing cash game stuff. Because they already. So the announcement was that while Chase is a game time decision, if he plays, he will be limited. So you already have that
Yeah.
run out. And then if Higgins doesn't play, the other factor here though is if you're playing large field tournament and Yoshvash is going to be like this, people are going to handle him like a skeleton key in terms of salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are other cheap wide receivers too. But you have a 9-point home favorite. Like, what's the run out? Like, I'll be happy to fade Yoshvash if he ends up being 40% rostered on an opening day slate as a 9-point home favorite against a secondary that's still good. Like the Patriots are
Yeah.
still
On
a
paper.
physical secondary on
On
paper. Yeah.
paper. Yeah.
The problem with the Patriots is that they lost Christian Barmore. Hopefully everything's all right with him. It's very scary
Yeah.
subject with him. And they traded Matthew Judon. So
Yeah,
like
Judon, yeah.
and like that's the big thing. That's like things that can impact their because they had a great run defense last year. Obviously, Barmore hurts that. The splits with him on and off the field were night and day, and then they lose their pass rush. But how much are the Bengals going to have to throw in that game is the other question. So like I don't know if he ends up like being really popular. Like so if you're in a cash game, he's min priced. He's hard to get away from. But
yeah,
when I look at these other receivers down here, and I'm like, oh well, will Yoshivash now pull away from AD Mitchell? Will he now pull away from Jackson Smith and Jigba? Right? Like if he's going to pull away from those types of ownerships, then I'm all for that. Like because I already like those players in those spots. So it'll be something to keep an eye on. The Justin Fields one will be interesting because obviously we just know like cheap Konami code quarterback gets points.
Yeah.
Enter
in roster.
Yeah, it is what it is. You just do it.
Yeah. That's an interesting discussion too, because like the Patriots have an elite secondary on paper. They lost their strength against the run and they lost their strength against the or in the pass rush. And this was already a defense that was generating pressure at a bottom 5 rate last season. So it doesn't matter how good your secondary is if you're not generating pressure on a guy like Joe Burrow, he's just going to pick you apart. So there's a lot going on there, a lot to discuss, a lot that could alter kind of how we're viewing the slate.
I mean, how are you? Are you viewing Yoshvash if it's just you're just going to whatever, just jam it in?
So I'm trying to keep an open mind to the situation because there's still such a wide range of potential outcomes that could happen there. I'm looking at this situation as how do we expect the Bengals to try and win this game? And do we expect the Bengals to be this like leaning forward in the reins on offense against an opponent that we very clearly have ranked in the bottom 2, maybe in the league this year? So I'm looking at Yoshvash versus the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And how we would expect the ownership between those two to shake out if we get like last minute T. Higgins is out and we know that Jamar Chase is either not playing or going to be limited. And the answer might be to play both. I don't know yet. Still working through that.
Yeah, what's interesting too is we talked about a couple spots. The Bucks too, like the Bucks. That's a game too where you could probably play Bucks defense still in that stack. Like, which is because of the amount of play volume we could see, and then the sack potential, turnover, stuff like that. That's a good one. We don't really do defenses very much here, but
yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, there's 4 defenses that are clear and above to me. We'll save those for the Slate podcast.
There you go.
Onesie twosies. Oh, by the ways, we're about to get out of here. Thank you guys again for joining us. Again, if you're new here, we do this every Friday at noon Eastern, and we will bring this to you for every main slate on the 2024 season. If you're not with 1 week season, head on over. You'll get everything for free in week 1. If you're not with Sharp Football Analysis, you can take 77% off everything on the site for a weekly packages. And then you can utilize code TAKE25 for 25% off site-wide as well to get access to all the great things that Rich is bringing to Sharp Football Analysis. So we'll leave it with onesie twosies. Oh, by the ways, this was typically the time of the show last year where we're like, oh yeah, play Mike Evans. Are there any of those? Are there any of those this week for you?
I have 2 guys that I think will be overlooked. We'll see if they are or not. But at least one guy you talked about, guys maybe we were down on and we're trying to calibrate to adjust to the spots they're in and treating it individually. There's a guy I was high on this offseason, and he got the usage in the preseason I wanted to see. And I kind of want to just, like I said, I was bullish on him this preseason, so I want to remain bullish on him. And the first guy is Chris Olave.
Okay.
The big thing about this offense last year it just had no easy buttons. It was literally 2 wide receiver sets, win vertically, inherently low targets. We wanted to see them. They were last in the league in play action rate. They were last in the league in pre-snap motion. And again, small sample size in the preseason, but we did see Chris Olave get targeted on 50% of his routes in the preseason. That won't happen. It won't be 50%.
Maybe in the sample of 1 week ago.
But again, they're only going to be running 2 wide receiver sets. They actually listed a fullback as part of their starting lineup. We know Taysom's going to be a big part of the offense too. But they use pre-snap motion on 65% of those dropbacks too. And since Chris Olave's entered the NFL, only Tyreek Hill has averaged more yards per out run with pre-snap motion than Chris Olave. So, and I just think this Panthers defense is just still hurting. It's definitely the weakest link. That game in general, we didn't talk about it because I don't think it's this like onslaught potential because I won't get to either quarterback. But I think that game has enough moving pieces to where maybe people are discounting. They look at it and they're like, Saints Panthers, gross. But I think I think that with Dave Canales and the addition of Clint Kubiak, like that game could be better than people think it is. And with Deontay Johnson added, right? Like, that game could just be better than people are thinking of it is. And I got one player that's just really gross. No one wanted to draft him, but I think he's in a good spot. Is Davante Adams.
Okay. Yeah. I am actually going to be playing Chargers passing stacks, as weird and crazy as that sounds. If they are, yes, we expect them to run the football, but like if this game environment turns into something where it's like we're just leveraging the uncertainty there, their pass offense is probably primarily going through just 2 guys. It's like it's Joshua Palmer and it's Ladd McConkey. And they're both priced below 5,200. 5,200 for Palmer and 4,700 on DraftKings for Ladd McConkey. You pair those guys and you get like 70% of what we expect the pass offense to be. Pair him with Justin Herbert, who's only 5,800. Like now we're cooking. Like this could be something. And if that is hitting, I would expect the Raiders, who we expect to be more reserved on offense, leveraging their defense. But if the Chargers are succeeding, that brings it right back to Davante Adams. So I will be playing Adams, and it will be with the Chargers pass stack, which seems vomit-inducing. But I think there is a path there. I do.
Yeah, I mean, he was second in the NFL in target rate behind Tyreek Hill last year. They didn't really change it. They had Brock Bowers, who's coming in off of a preseason injury. We'll see how incorporated he is in the opening one. But he does get an upgrade. I mean, even though it is Gardner Minshew, but we seen Gardner Minshew kind of facilitate the kind of fantasy smoothing targets out that for Michael Pittman last year when they transitioned from Anthony Richardson to the thing. Aiden O'Connell was 31st in inaccurate target throw rate to wide receivers last year. Gardner Minshew was 16th. So while he's not elite, it's an improvement. And I think he matches up well against the secondary. He has really, really given the secondary trouble in the past individually. And you'll see how Jesse Minter, the new defense coordinator, wants to approach this because Brandon Staley's gone. But man, Adams has really given guys like Asante Samuel a lot of trouble in the past. So, I mean, he's gone. And also, Adams is Antonio Pierce's guy. Like, if you watch the receiver show and followed, like, he averaged over 11 targets per game. If you just tell me I can get a guy that is probably a good bet for double-digit targets, regardless of how many times they throw, I probably don't want to overlook that, right? Especially a guy that's gone over 100 yards every game against the Chargers. Well, but one against the Chargers. He had 12 targets in every game. I just think he's got to kind of be on the board, and I don't know how many people like just get there because the one you said the game, people are gonna be like, oh, Harbaugh versus Antonio Pierce.
Yeah, snooze fest.
All these handoffs, 7-3.
Yeah, just bring up the Raiders and the Vikings game from last year, the 3-0 game.
But I've talked about too, like, what if I've talked about a couple scenarios from a best ball stance, like, what if the Chargers actually throw more? And they are going to run a lot, but what if they do throw more and they're not as reserved as people think? Because when you look at the quarterbacks Harbaugh and Roman have had their exposure to in the NFL, it's been this archetype of quarterback that is mobile first and is not a pocket passer. You know, Roman had Tyrod Taylor. They obviously had Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. Harbaugh had Colin Kaepernick and Alex Smith before that. So it's like Alex Smith is like the one kind of pocket passer. Like Justin Herbert is quantifiably the best pocket passer either of these guys have had attachment to the NFL. So,
and
I mean, there's an opportunity maybe we were taking that one step.
Yeah, taking that one step further too, like what if Herbert adds some more with his legs? I mean, he has the size and physicality that a guy like Josh Allen had. He was not really known as like this crazy rushing presence, and he kind of developed into that. So there might be some rushing upside for a guy like Justin Herbert as well. Dude,
that was it.
I am so stoked to be back with you. Apologies for the late announcement on this show, but we are good to go for the entirety of the 2024 season. Again, everything is free. 1 week season. Head on over there, check out all the inner circle workings, and you can get a nice 77% discount over at Sharp Football Analysis. And then use code TAKE25 for 25% off the seasonal stuff. Rich, so glad to be back talking to you, man. Again, we'll bring this to you every week, Fridays at noon Eastern. And until next week, y'all, we will see you at the top of the leaderboards. Peace.
1 week